We're here again to take a bite out of crime. How are we doing, Crystal?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. Interested to hear what you got to say to me.
I know. So this week we're going to do a little bit more of a climate and how it affects women,
Mm.
also an international one. So I feel like everyone has this mindset on women in the Middle East. And over the years, it's kind of had a tough opinion because everyone remembers like the war in Iraq and all of that. But women in that area are just slowly and slowly kind of becoming more oppressed, in my opinion. And one thing that isn't talked about often is the women who are giving birth in this area. And recently, something came out in the news regarding climate and the climate impact over in Pakistan and how it's affecting mothers. So,
Hmm.
Pakistan is one of the top 5 countries that's been most affected with the climate change. And this past summer, the temperatures there are getting up to 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And for anybody
Wow.
who has ever stood outside, I get hot in like 90-degree weather. I can't even wrap my head around what 122 just standard, not like the feeling of it, just standard
Oh my
122.
gosh. What's the real feel? Like 150?
I I can't even tell you because everywhere is just so astounded that it hit 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degree Fahrenheit that they're like it doesn't even
Yikes.
matter at that point.
Yikes.
And putting in perspective, your body goes into heat stroke at 104. So
I
let's
think mine does it sooner than that. I think mine's at like 95. I'm in heat stroke.
yeah, and like that's the thing is like it varies for person to person. And now taking these temperatures, on top of that, the monsoon season is in that area. And according to locals, they've been getting worse and worse over the years. The floods are decimating towns, making them completely uninhabitable. They have refugees in their own country. And now imagine you're pregnant. You're about to give birth.
Mm.
1 out of 3 women over there have zero access to any health care, and less than half of them give birth in a hospital. Pakistan has the highest rate of infant mortality in the world, having a infant die every 2 minutes and a mother
Oh,
dies every hour, which
wow.
absolutely just blows my mind. And these women are trying to kind of proact their situation. So there's a new school that's training a couple hundred midwives to send across the country to try and help them. But these women are being sent to these really poor, decimated communities that have low education. They're illiterate. They don't trust outsiders with education. And they're homeless. They're displaced. They're just trying to survive. And most of the midwives are talking about their advice to them is just drink water, stay hydrated, like the bare necessities that I think we all take for granted.
Right.
That's their
That they may not
advice.
even have access to.
Right. 100%. They're struggling to eat, let alone drink, let alone nourish their bodies properly.
Especially in the heat.
Mhm.
I mean, anyone who's been pregnant can tell you like August is the worst month because you're so hot already and then it's very hot outside, but I mean, I've never experienced 122 degrees, so I can only imagine that's 10 times worse when you're pregnant.
Yeah, and pregnant and now giving birth at home with no assistance, no care, no medical attention for your entire pregnancy. Like it that alone has its risks. Now adding on the heat and the monsoons and the fears of giving birth in that situation. And then once you have your baby, knowing in the back of your head that it might not survive because of the conditions you live in, which every 2 minutes, that's
I mean, it makes you think too, like, are these children being born premature because of the heat? Because if you're extremely dehydrated, you're going to start having contractions if you're pregnant. And so, if, especially if they're not getting medical care, I wonder how many people even solidly know how far along they are. I mean, maybe if you have a perfect menstrual cycle and you're tracking it diligently, you would know. But most people don't. And it's just sort of a guess. And then, even when you get a due date, it's an estimate. But if you're severely dehydrated, you could go into premature labor at any time.
Yeah.
So and that's going to be a factor, especially if you're giving birth at home and there's no access to NICU, there's no access to anything. So,
Yeah.
ugh.
Yeah. And so I was watching interviews of the midwives who have been dispersed into different parts of the country talking to these women and asking just very basic questions that I feel like most in a in the society we live in, most women can answer. How old are you? How long have you been pregnant? How old is your baby? How many pregnancies have you
Mm,
had? These are things that these women were estimating. Where how old are you? 26 or 27? How old's your baby? I don't know, 5 to 6 months. How long have you been pregnant? No idea. And these culturally, they're expected to have as many children as possible to have these large families. And there are a couple of that when you ask them, how many children do you have? One woman was like, I had 8, 5 have
ugh,
survived.
ugh.
Right. And it's just gut wrenching because you're looking at her and she says it so nonchalantly, like, because it's normal to them. It's that, well,
Well,
I've
that's
had all of
her
these, but
reality.
mhm.
Like that's the life that she is living, where she's lost her children. And it's also, if you don't have access to doctors and medicine, you don't have access to reliable birth control. So even if you theoretically weren't going to have as many children as you possibly could, you may not even have that option within your family, within your marriage, because it may not be an option to get reliable birth control. So
Right. And that's
you're
where
just
birth control
stuck.
gets sticky because you have some articles supporting that Islam as a religion, foundationally, you have some saying abortions are allowed, birth control is allowed, you do what's in the best interest of the mother. But then you have some more fundamentalist sites saying that none of that is allowed, birth control is not allowed, abortions aren't allowed. You're only allowed to do what your husband tells you.
Mm.
So it's tough because I think it depends on what world you're living in. Are you living in the elite society or are you living in a more hostile area or are you just trying to make it day by day? Like it seems like there's a very vast spread in the country when it comes
I
to
mean,
those specific things.
definitely controlling women goes hand in hand with religion a lot of the time, and definitely there can be different interpretations. My understanding is that in Islam and Judaism, abortion and birth control are okay, but I think that if you're in a submissive patriarchal kind of situation where you don't have autonomy,
Mhm.
he can make whatever decision and justify it however he needs to. And I think you can
Yeah.
spin things how you need to. But also, I just meant they may literally not have it. They
Yeah.
may not be able to get it, even if he
Right.
wanted to
That
get it.
too. Yeah. Because I
Yeah.
think that's the fundamentalism that we see in any religion. It becomes the most extreme version of said religion.
And it's usually to oppress women in some form.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
often what it is.
I completely agree. So, given the fact we now established that they don't really have the access, like how little access is there? And a couple of the stats that I found are some have never seen doctors in their entire lives until these midwives started dispersing around the country. And they did one interview with an OBGYN, and she is responsible for 40,000 women.
That's
One.
crazy.
One person,
There's one?
40,000 women.
Wow.
And I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't even think I've talked to 40,000 people in my life, let alone
I
being
have no
responsible for that many people.
I just have like no concept of how many people that even I it's that's a lot. That's a lot of anything, but that's a ton of patients.
Yeah.
And I'm just
And
thinking of the volume of patients I see, and it's nowhere near that. It doesn't make sense to me. The math doesn't.
right.
But I guess she's not really seeing them much.
Right. And on top of that, you have her, she does 1 year rotations. So where she is right now for those 40,000 women, she's only available to them for a year and then she leaves. And there's no promise that there's going to be someone who is going to take her spot. So I think
That's
that's why
terrifying.
they're pushing these midwives through this new education program is so that
Sure.
you might not have an OB there, but the midwife is a pretty good second. And if you can get at least access, that's better than nothing.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think midwives are great. And I think that, especially for a home birth situation, like that's probably who you need. An OBGYN is not going to really deliver you at home.
And I think also for people who are living in those kind of communities, they might be a little bit more trusting of someone like a midwife than someone who has a quote fancy education, that they might be a little bit more receptive to someone who is just like them from a poor community who did this and not the high elite person who went to college and university. And I don't know, I just feel like maybe they might be more receptive to midwives in those more like remote places. But
Maybe. What's the training like for the midwives, though? I guess kind of
it
minimal.
was
Because here
only
it's
a
a lot.
year. Yeah, which
That's
I also
quick
thought was crazy. But again, if you're just trying to get anything is better than nothing. So,
for
but yeah, the
sure.
midwife training is 1 year. And from here in the US, the training is like a whole nother college degree. I did a little research. Like Penn State has one of the top midwifery schools in the country, which I thought
Hmm.
was interesting. I never would have guessed that. um, but also like really hard to get into. Who
Oh yeah, they're extremely competitive programs. Being a midwife is basically being a doctor. It's a lot of school, and then when you're done with school, you're still not done. Like you have to intern and observe, and it's a lengthy process. But I guess they're just trying to basically have paramedics and doulas
Yeah.
there if it's a year.
Yeah,
Something's better than nothing.
I think that's the thought is like, let's do, if we have this immediate crisis, how do we address it in the immediate and get that number down? Because I think they're starting to realize they have countries that are considered beneath them that have death rates nowhere near theirs. So having to do something. And the other thing that they started doing was they started opening those remote clinics with the midwives, but the higher, more elite hospitals, every once in a while, actually have started to open their doors for extreme emergency cases and will allow the poor women to come in and give birth for free. And they're actually setting it up where the rich are starting to pay a little bit more so that it will pay for the poor to have their babies in the hospital, which it surprised me. I feel like a lot of the time you don't have them openly being like, "Well, no, we're going to charge you more so someone else can have their baby here." It's normally a lot more secretive than that, like a little sneaky. And
I
in
mean,
this
it's kind of an idea of universal health care, right? Where it's
yeah.
like we're all going to pay in.
Yeah, and so in these circumstances, it's far and few between, but I think it's a nice step in the right direction where they're like, if you absolutely have to, we will help you. But like, at least they're opening the door now because before they'd be like, well, if you can't pay, you can't come, or you aren't wealthy enough, or you aren't in the right society. Now, at least if they are aware, that might be an option, which is kind of nice that they're putting in effort.
Definitely. I mean, that is tragic, and I hope the situation improves over there.
So, I'm curious what your point of view is with like the one-on-one. So you have these women who don't trust outsiders, don't trust medical personnel because they're just not educated. They don't understand what's being communicated to them. Um, And then you have people coming in trying to tell them what to do with basic information, but you have so few of them. How do you think that it's going to actually work out? Because if you have 40,000 people and one or two people trying to help them, for someone who doesn't understand how that works, like that doesn't seem feasible.
Well, I mean, the issue is that prenatal care is important and it's also complex. And it's not like there's just, you can have one visit with a midwife and that's going to cover your prenatal care for your whole pregnancy. So I think it's about being realistic. And I think if I wanted to improve the situation, I would definitely make sure prenatal vitamins were available. And that's also why I'm personally a believer in like universal healthcare and that people deserve healthcare and that it's not something that you should have to purchase, because especially for pregnant women, it should just be automatically included, which I know is maybe controversial, but that's how I feel about it. And I think that prenatal vitamins need to be available. Clean drinking water in large quantities needs to be available. Probably air conditioning in the homes would be very helpful.
Mm,
And I mean, people need to be tested for all different types of problems, because if you're not seeing a medical provider and you develop symptoms of preeclampsia or cholestasis or gestational diabetes, there's all kinds of comorbidities that can come up that can really complicate a pregnancy and result in a very ill mother and a very ill baby, and definitely maternal and fetal mortality. And I'm the real risk of prematurity is there, the lack of aftercare as well. So
yeah.
basically, the situation would have to improve where we put a lot more resources and everyone goes to the doctor all the time, because that's what you need to do when you're pregnant. Like it's a burden, honestly, because it's a lot of work to be pregnant and to do all of the prenatal care that you're actually supposed to do is a lot of
Right.
work.
Yeah.
And but if you're just trying to have as many children as possible and you don't maybe expect all of them to survive, I don't know, maybe it's less of a priority. But there's no simple solution to something like that.
Yeah. And I think that even though they're doing their best to get access to even midwives or minimal care access, when you're dealing with this climate crisis on top of it, where it's so hot you can't even walk down the street. It's raining so bad that you're more concerned that your house isn't going to be there in the morning, let alone going to a doctor's appointment. I think having this climate crisis on top of the pre-existing like maternal issues and medical issues that they have is just doubling down on these women are having a really hard time, but nobody wants to talk about it.
Well, thank goodness for us. We're here to talk about
Obviously.
it. I mean, it's just so terribly, terribly sad. And I feel bad for anyone that's pregnant in less than ideal circumstances, because it's also hard to be pregnant even in amazing circumstances. So for them to be dealing with such harsh environmental issues as well as like poverty and all other, like, it must be extremely stressful. And I don't know, my heart goes out to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that was my little recap of the climate crisis that we had. I thought that was a kind of interesting one taking I wouldn't have thought about the weather being such an impact until I read that article. So, do you have any final
Yeah.
thoughts?
I mean, it's just sort of terrifying to think about how the increasingly worse climate issues are going to really be impacting everyone everywhere. And the temperature rising globally is scary.
Yeah, and I think it's even kind of gotten all over the place where growing up, at least where we are, it was always like, okay, by this month it's going to start doing this and it was pretty consistent. And now like it was 75 degrees a couple days ago and now it's like 40 something. Like it's just I can't it feels more all over the place. And when you take it to an extreme, like these people are dealing with, I I give them credit for trying to do something, but it's so hard to fight a battle on two fronts is really kind of where they're at, I feel.
Yeah, because it's not really solvable. It's not like they can fix the weather at this point.
And just flip the switch.
Yeah, so it's like you just have to deal with your circumstances while you're having them. But this is a extremely difficult situation.
Yeah. Well,
It's a good topic though. I enjoyed it.
yeah, hopefully they figure it out. Hopefully the midwives are going to be beneficial to the more remote areas and their rates will go down because I think it's really sad.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming to our news chats for a little bite, and I
Little
hope you
bite
have a
of
great
crime.
day.
Okay. All right. Talk soon.
Talk soon.